Well, I think I did my first distillation when I was 16 as a young technician working in the pharmaceutical industry, jetting forward quite a few decades into whisky manufacture and making gin. One of the things that we are very good at is understanding the process of distillation. We've done it many times, from small scale all the way through to our manufacturing plants within the pharmaceutical industry. Making gin, which we set out to do way back in 2012. First thing we needed to do was to obtain a still, not the big patience that we use nowadays for production, but our little tiny copper alembic still, and we called her Faith. The first distillery in Kent for 200 years was in the corner of my wife's kitchen, where we installed Faith. So making gin is very much about, as in any distillation, it's a separation process. So we're separating solids from the liquid that we distill, and we're separating flavours. Either some flavours stay in the still and some will distill across, and we separate them as they come out of the still. So people ask, how do we make Kent Dry Gin? Gold medal at the World Spirits Competition. That was work we did by looking at the botanicals we wanted, and we selected 16. And some of them are blends, so many of them the traditional botanicals that you would see in a gin: juniper, coriander, cassia, angelica, licorice, orris and cubebs. So with those, we distilled them, each of them separately, and as they came out of Faith, liquid comes out just here, we collected fractions, 7 fractions. So the first one would be called the heads, the last one would be called the tails, but then we had a range in the middle that we wanted to understand how the flavour profile changed. From the minute you start distilling until the very end, you get a very different flavour coming through. At the beginning of the day when you start the distillation, it's light, ethereal, and at the end of the day it's much heavier and woody. So with our first distillation of those 8 botanicals, the traditional ones, we put them in separately, collected the heart cut, which was a selection of between 2 and 6 of the fractions, and then we tasted those and selected which fractions we would use for making the gin. The next step was, to understanding that, to put all the botanicals in the still in one go rather than separately. And as you distill, the flavour profile changes because some of the botanical flavours will interact with the others, so you do get an evolution of the flavour coming through. Using our chemistry knowledge, we then backtracked to take some of the botanicals down in weight and others up until we got the flavour profile that we wanted for our base gin. So that's our base gin. We then needed citrus components, so we've got whole Italian lemons, we've got Seville orange and kaffir lime leaf. So we distilled those separately, decided what fractions we wanted, worked out the weight of botanicals, and then put them all together and distilled in Faith. That gave us the equivalent of a citrus vodka. Okay, not a gin, no juniper. We then did the same, the third component. Kent Dry is a floral led gin, so we've got lots of flowers from the county, so things like lavender, we've got hops in there, chamomile, things like that, and some samphire from the Romney Marsh. We distilled those separately, decided the weights that we needed to put, and we distilled those over to give essentially a floral vodka. So we've now got 3 liquids, 1 gin, 1 citrus vodka and 1 floral vodka, and then we put a bit of this, a bit of that, varied the amounts of the liquids until that aha moment when we said that is going to be a really nice gin. Our trick then was to back calculate how much of the botanicals that we'd got in the liquids back to dry solids so that they could all go into the still in one go, and then distilled those over. We got a gin that was quite similar to the work on the blending, and then we had to transfer that to our big still Patience, who's actually quite different because she's got a rectification column, a little bit more science and some calculations, and we worked out the right amount of botanicals to put in. We scaled from 2 litres to 50, that was a minimum stir in Patience, and then from 50 to 100, 100 to 200, and then up to 300, which is our current manufacturing process. Everything worked beautifully, a little bit of tweaking on the amounts that went in, and as I say, we ended up with Anno Kent Dry Gin, which we launched in October 2013.